was up here. It was Jordan. Hey, Sonja, can you hear me? Hey, Sonja, can you hear me? Stay up on the screen like Georgella did last night. If you haven't seen that.
I'm gonna make myself quiet now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Anything worth doing once, worth doing twice, let's do it again.
Run to the spring, fetch me some water. You be my legs, my young granddaughter. You know I don't get around the way I used to. Won't you do for me the things I cannot do? Pin up my hair, there's company coming. We'd better get some biscuits in the oven. You know I'll fry this meat when I'm through. You set the table and I'll sing a song for you. Chief Redbird fell in the muddy water and that's the last they heard of him. I lived my life by the banks of the river, but I never did learn to swim. Will the wild geese fly and the coal trains rattle and the time keeps pressing on by? Me and the Redbird River are gonna roll on till we die. These apples here are good for frying. We'll peel the rest and put 'em up for drying. You know I can't stand to see 'em lay and spoil. Our winter's gain will be our summer's toil. Chief Redbird fell in the muddy water and that's the last they heard of him. I lived my life by the banks of the river, but I never did learn to swim. Where the wild geese fly and the coal trains rattle and the time keeps passing.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I get myself settled. Good evening. Sorry, I know we had a lot of commotion in here, and so it is 7:30. We had the book table fail for those that aren't here while we're but it is back. It is resurrected, and it is ready for you to come purchase many wonderful books that from the Red Spotted Newt. So we would encourage you, if you're here on campus or if you're just out and about in town, you don't have to be a participant this week. If you're in the area and want to come shop at the bookstore, we would encourage you to do so. Mandy has curated quite the collection, and you should take them all home with you. Also, just one other announcement is we thank many people that have joined Fireside First, our book club that we mentioned last night, and so we'll do another drawing at the end for some more books. I had a couple questions that people asked me that I will answer for you. One is, if you won last night, your name will go back in on Friday night for Adriana's collections. So we are holding those till the end of the week, and then they'll go back in on Friday night. Some folks have said you've already pre-ordered books. You may have already pre-ordered Drowned Town or The Girl Singer, and we thank you for that. And so, but you don't have to feel left out. Of course, you could always join and give one to a friend, or you can join and let us know, and we'll hold your first shipment until till later, and you can still be a part of the fun this week and win some prizes as well. So if you're interested, you can still join, and then just come grab me later, and we'll kind of put a hold until those first shipments go out. So those are a few questions I have. I hope everyone had a wonderful day. I think it went smoothly. Hopefully everyone would say that. Less hiccups today than yesterday with all our technology, and so thanks to Corey and as he comes and deals with a hiccup. And so thank you all so much for working with us and being patient as we have pushed the boundaries of what Troublesome Creek is used to in terms of technology. I do want to get going. I think Corey might be ready. Are we good? Okay, thumbs up back there in the back. So that is great. So I have the privilege of introducing our first introducer, and I should know who that is off the top. I don't think, is it Greta? No, it's the other. So we are introducing our other introducer this evening, and so I will turn the screen over to them. Oh, that's right. You're in the room. That's why I was like, I don't see the name on the screen. It's because you are in the room. Sorry. I was like, okay, gotcha. Come on.
Well, good evening. My name is Shelly Davis. This is my 4th year at Hyman, including last year's virtual workshop. And tonight it's my honor to introduce faculty member, fiction writer Leah Hampton. Leah is a graduate of the Michener Center for Writers. She has been awarded UT Austin's Keene Prize for Literature and the Philip Roth Residency at the Stadler Center for Poetry. Her debut short story collection, Fuckface and Other Stories, was released last year. It was named as one of the best books of 2020 by the Paris Review, the Newark Public Library, Slate, and others. The first fiction I read from Leah was Parkway, a story that appears in Fuckface and focuses on a park ranger who sometimes encounters dead bodies. I found that story flat out disturbing, and I mean that as high praise. Leah is a thoughtful and challenging writer, but she's also funny, sarcastic, irreverent, profane, the kind of person you read and think, we should be friends. But it's important to remember that funny women are also usually deadly serious. They say that things are funny because they're true, and that's also the case with the things that will break your heart. Leah's work does both, often at the same time. She has an eye for the absurd, but a heart for the small and intimate heartbreaks of a life. She writes about an Appalachia that we all know, working class people, living everyday modern lives in a region of the country that often gets framed as both exotic and less than. To be Appalachian is to be stereotyped by outsiders in a variety of ways, and too often that leads to us buying into some of those narratives ourselves. All of us who think of ourselves as Appalachian writers want to bust those stereotypes and tell the true stories as we see them of this place. That is an overarching focus of Leah's work, to puncture stereotypes and complicate the narratives of Appalachia that are dominated by the white male viewpoint, from Davy Crockett pioneer fantasies to the right-wing truck bros that national media would have their readers believe populate every diner across the Appalachian region. She writes about the truths of this place, about resource extraction, feminism, environmental destruction, and injustices large and small. While the dominant narratives of Appalachia have always glossed over the women, Leah's fiction and nonfiction work aims to upend the stereotypes and reposition our understanding of Appalachia as a more feminine place. She will make you laugh, and she will break your heart, because it is true. Please welcome Leah Hampton.
Okay, I'm moving this chair because I've been sitting all day and I don't want to sit anymore. Hello. Wow, I've been coming here so long. I need a second because I'm up here. I've been out there so many times. So this is really special. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to Shelly, and that was beautiful. Thank you. I'm so grateful to my students. We have such a good class. Everybody's so smart. I love coming here. And I'm so grateful to my old friends. I have so many old friends here. I'm already crying. Okay, so Annette took a risk last night and read new work, so I'm going to read new work. I am working on a new short story collection that is a book of retellings. I've always said I'm a closeted horror writer, so I'm going to read you a fairy tale. I hope that's okay. I've been working on this group of fairy tale retellings. I had to make some cuts to this because it goes on a little long, so if you don't know what I'm talking about at any point, just come up to me after and I'll tell you what you missed. Okay. And I'm reading one. I don't put profanity in all of my titles, I promise, but I am reading it. This story is called Meemaw Fucks a Wolf. And then that's it. I promise I won't ever do it again. It was in my system and I had to get it out. Okay. So it's called Meemaw Fucks a Wolf. When the wolf came to her for the last time, many years on, Meemaw thought she could protect herself. True, she was sick. Her breasts were pocked with an inflammatory cancer that had slithered into her vital organs, and these days she spent most of her time in bed. And true, she had neglected to put storm windows on her cabin last winter, so with one sharp rap on the thin panes, any beast could break into the house. Late winter slushed and drizzled outside, and the drizzle often froze into slick patches of ice. If she stepped into one of these patches and slipped, she'd break herself. The black ice winked and sparkled at Meemaw in the pale March sun, saying, "Try me, woman, let me take you down." And true, she was alone in the woods. Her grandbabies visited once a week at most. If she fell, if the wolf bested her, no one would hear her cries. But Meemaw had her Barlow knife, and arms corded with old muscle, and knowledge of the woods and March ice and the habits of beasts. She had an old shotgun, if it came to that, and despite her illness, she still had all her hair, fine and wavy and red. She was past 50 now, and it had darkened to auburn, with filaments of silver that shone like needles in the lamplight. No longer the hair of a girl in desperate new love, but still red enough for a wolf. He would come, she was sure of it. She could swear that twice now at dawn she had seen him lurking behind the poplars high on the ridge above her house. These glimpses brought back thoughts of the wolf's russet fur. Meemaw dizzied and shivered at the remembrance. The best lovers never leave us. She had been 15 the first time he tried to take her. Though she was only a girl then, she knew what the wolf was, because this was a time when the mountains held many such animals. She knew herself to be bright and worth saving, so she did not succumb to him. Instead, she fought him off and stabbed him in the haunch. "Wolf," she had told him, "I reckon I know what you come for." She and her friends and sisters were swimming in the creek, and she stood soaked and half-dressed at the edge of the water. Behind a low shrub, she could see a panting, wet canine mouth and black eyes darting between the girls. Her voice was sharp and strong, a voice the other girls feared. It echoed off the stones and boulders in the creek. "You keep away." When the other girls had gone and her back was turned for a moment, she heard a whisper of parting branches, and the wolf was upon her. He pushed her to the ground, and she lay on her stomach, her knife useless in her pocket. Pulses of light flashed behind her eyes, and all around her was the scent of pine. "Quit it," she said, kicking her feet. "You ain't better than me." The wolf laughed and reared up to take his first bite, and she spun on her hips in the dirt. She flipped herself over and sank her blade into his body. The wolf did not yelp. Instead, he cocked his head the way dogs do and released her. She scrambled to her feet and dusted herself off. She said, "Leave me alone." The wolf panted and licked his wound. He said, "What will you do for me if I spare you?" "Won't do shit for you," she said. "I'll live." "And do as you please?" "Damn straight." "Fair play," he said. "So long as you never cut your hair, I will leave you be." She squinted and touched her head. "I will do as I please." The wolf stood, said her name, and sauntered into the woods. She walked home, knife at the ready, wondering who had told the wolf her name. The blood of the wolf was on her hands, and the stain lingered for days, warming her skin. His coarse fur had stroked her wrist as the knife went in, stroked her neck, her thighs when she dreamed. The wolf circled her for weeks, teasing her from the edges of clearings, whimpering. Sometimes he even winked at her, with his thick, soft ears standing high. She spit and threw her shoulders back so that her hair swooped like a shimmering red curtain. The wolf whimpered all the more when she did this, but he let her be. Instead, he ate fatherless children and tore out the hearts of girls who cooed at him from the high school bleachers, coaxing him into the shadows under the stands until they realized too late what he wanted. Not much was done by the sheriff about these lost, devoured girls. Not much ever is. The following year, she fell pregnant and married a doughy, hairless boy who worked for the county. She told her new husband, "Sink your teeth into my neck a little." "What on earth?" he said. "You're like a wild thing." She said, "You should grow a beard," but he refused. He was a good father. She never felt the need to stab him, and right up until the day he died, stringing Christmas lights on the spire of the county courthouse, slipped and fell at age 27. He had never once tried to eat her. The wolf came again in her 30s. Her children were almost grown, and the youngest of her 3 daughters had just begun her monthlies. One day, while hanging laundry, she saw a patch of fur behind a blooming rhododendron. All her children were at school. She peeked out from behind her lace curtains and watched as the wolf approached the clothesline to sniff her daughter's garments. The wolf's black eyes made her hungry. "I see," she thought, feeling a new, delicious ache in her belly. "I know what he means now." When the wolf had gone, she scooped up her keys and marched to her truck. She rumbled down her steep gravel drive, then turned left instead of right, and went deeper into the cove, away from town. When she arrived at a bedraggled house with 5 rusty Mustangs parked in the weeds, she got out and nodded to Arthur, the big man on the porch. Arthur dealt in pills and pot and whatever else people needed to get by. Inside, he kept 6 loaded pistols and 3 prosthetic legs. 1 for running, 1 for everyday use, and a shiny titanium one for special occasions. Arthur raised a slack hand, and she nodded in return. Today, he'd left off his fake leg, and he sat scratching the stump of his knee in the warm sun. He called her name. "Been a while," he said. "I'm wanting a muzzle," she said, "a good one." Behind Arthur's house was a maze of dog pens and runs. He was a breeder, and when not selling illicit substances, Arthur dealt in working pups. "A muzzle," he said. "Didn't know you kept a dog." "I don't, but I got one coming to visit, and I don't trust the owner." Arthur frowned. "Honey," he said, "why don't you just tell them not to come?" She flicked her hand to indicate that the situation was complicated. "Well, go on in the kitchen, shelf by the back, pick you out one." She did as instructed, and she came out holding a bright yellow muzzle made of thick straps and steel rings. Arthur refused to charge him. She thanked him and walked back to the truck. "Whatever breed it is," he called, "don't turn your back on him." She leaned out the open window of her car. "Learned that lesson already," she said, and drove home. The next morning, the wolf came as the girls were piling into the school bus. She saw him appear under a hemlock, back haunches taut, black eyes staring at her middle daughter. She stood in front of her daughters and met his gaze, raised her hand, palm out, firm. The wolf sat in the leaves and waited. Once the bus drove off, she walked back to the house and left the door open. She took the muzzle and her knife from her purse and sat down in her armchair, tucking her weapons out of sight between the cushions. She said, "Come on then, old cur," and before she could finish saying it, the wolf pranced right through the door. He was lithe, more wiry than she remembered. Perhaps he had aged like she had. She said, "I don't like the way you look at my girls." The wolf licked a paw. They favor you. The middle one has your hair. You will not touch them. I made a bargain for your life, said the wolf, not theirs. Then we'll just have to make a new bargain, she said. We'll set new terms. Her hair was tangled in a tortoiseshell clip. She reached up and let it down, fell past her shoulders, past her knees, and floated across the arms of the chair. She said, I want something from you. The wolf lowered his head. He knew what she meant. You want two things from me, then. She produced the muzzle from under the cushion, and the wolf bared his teeth. You don't trust me? If you do as I say and wear this in my house, she said, you can have me as long as you like, under one condition. The wolf's eyes swung from the muzzle to her hair. Your daughters, he said. You will not have them, she replied. The wolf crawled on his belly toward her and let her fix the muzzle over his snout. When she had made sure it was secure, she stood and took off her dress, then lay down beside him. Agreed, he said with a sigh. And oh, how they took to each other. Scent of pine, spit and sweat and lust, the whole house shaking. They were raw and knowing and beguiled together, and they took delight in each other until neither could breathe without rasping. As the afternoon lengthened, the wolf became restless, and she announced that the girls would be home soon from school. The wolf said, take this off, scratching at the muzzle with his front paw. Go out on the porch, she said. The wolf went outside, and she closed and locked the door behind him and went to the window. She opened it a crack, just enough to get her hand out, and unlatched the muzzle. Come again tomorrow, she said. The wolf returned the following day, and they repeated everything the same. He visited her every day for a whole season, and each day was the same. Low down he came, then muzzle, fuck, and heaven. At the close of spring, the wolf disappeared, and she did not see him again for many years. In the papers, she read stories of unsolved murders in another county, where the bodies of girls were found heartless, fleshless, buried neatly in the snow. But he kept his word, and her own daughters lived. They lived, and two of them married, and one of them had children, 2 boys, and a sweet girl who called her Meemaw. March was cold, and the cancer made her shiver worse than she ever had. Her arms ached when she lifted medicine to her lips. She waited for the wolf. When he finally came on a frigid, moonless night, she was momentarily disappointed. His fur had thinned in patches, and he was gray at the snout. His muscles seemed loose under his coat, like hanging meat. She could see a faint scar where she'd stabbed him decades before. Who am I to judge, said Meemaw, when the wolf saw the way she looked at him. I am endangered, said the wolf, raising his chin. It was true. There were no red wolves left in these parts. Farmers and sheriffs, angry at all the murders in their towns, had shot almost every specimen. The wolf told Meemaw he had no brothers left. In their place, coy dogs and invasive fat coyotes now roamed the woods, tearing open the bellies of newborn calves, stealing soft house cats from their owners. Coyotes had no respect for the mountains they had migrated to, said the wolf. There was no bargaining with them, no finesse. No scent of pine, neither, said Meemaw. The wolf said, you should lock your door. I knew you were coming, she replied. But if it had not been me, he said, what would you have done? She nodded at her barlow knife on the table. The wolf sneered. Those mongrels would tear you apart. Maybe that's all I deserve, said Meemaw. After all, what am I? Just an old sick woman nobody sees anymore. I see you, said the wolf. Bright as day, sweet as milk. Doctor says I'm all ate up with cancer, said Meemaw. She snorted. What will I taste like? Has the cancer reached your heart? Don't think so, said Meemaw. Just my titties and my liver and things. Heart beats fine. My blood pressure's still as low as a swimmer's. That's all that matters, said the wolf, with a twitch of his tail. That's the part I want. Meemaw sighed. Do you remember? The first time, said the wolf, at the creek. Meemaw nodded again. I was just a young'un, didn't know a thing, she said, except that you smelled so good, and I couldn't stand to go near you or I'd faint. You smelled of rosewater and dillweed, he said. All those pickles my mama made me put up every summer. "Ah, yes," said the wolf, raising his nose. "Your mother." An awful thought pulsed under her cheekbones and made them grow hot. "You knew my mama?" The wolf said Mima's name, the one her mother had given her, the one no one called her anymore. Then he asked, "Don't you know how old I am?" "And the second time," said the wolf, changing the subject. He drew a slow breath. "The season you outsmarted me with that muzzle." She pushed her hair behind her ears. "I never did trust you." "Yes, rightly so. That was a good spring." Mima had to agree. "And you were satisfied, and I kept our bargain?" She agreed again, but warily. "I still hold you to it." The wolf closed his eyes. "When will you die?" She stammered a little. "They give me 8 months." The wolf nodded. Outside, a squirrel alighted on the porch railing, twisting its tail, and chittered. The sound reminded Mima of a rusted hinge creaking open. "Wolf," she said, "I'm frightened." He nodded again, and his voice was soft. "Then I can take you now, if you wish." Mima looked around her little house. She thought of the nausea of losing her hair, of months of weakness and cost and pain. Her body was tired. Surrendering to him would be better than a slow, wasting death, would it not? The wolf was offering her a kindness. Was that what it was? Could she call it love? "Tell me something," she said. "Yes?" "Was I beautiful?" The wolf said her name once more, then ripped open her throat in one clean, painless bite. A few hours later, Mima's granddaughter pulled up to the house in a battered silver coupe. She got out, arms loaded with plastic containers full of cornbread, and crunched across the gravel to Mima's front door. The lamps inside were off, but the porch light glowed bright. By the door, she saw a strange, shiny mass of some sort of rotten offal. The meat was gray and sickly and looked as if it had been chewed and spit out. "Hello?" she called. "Mima, are you cooking in there?" She pushed open the unlatched door. Her long red hair, just like her grandmother's, draped down her back like a cape. The granddaughter went inside and called again. She walked to the bedroom and found the wolf in her Mima's bed, spent and rapturous, sniffing the old woman's dress. Teeth white, eyes black, ears like velvet. The granddaughter trembled, scent of pine, muscle, and fur. The wolf said, "You are not one of her daughters." "No," she said. "I'm her granddaughter." The wolf smiled. "Indeed." She asked, "What should I do?" "Do as you please," said the wolf, and the granddaughter fainted. When she awoke, she was lying on her grandmother's bedroom floor, and the wolf was sniffing her stomach. "Sweet as milk," he said. The wolf ate the granddaughter in one gulp, giving no pleasure to her, none of the slow rapture of being devoured and known. He was a beast, after all, and that is what beasts do. Once inside him, the granddaughter lit a match and found her grandmother resting there in the belly of the wolf. Mima was curled up in a sleeping position, smiling and dead and torn open. The granddaughter was whole, but she would soon perish in the wolf's gut. She could already feel his stomach acid beginning to dissolve her soft skin. Nothing about the experience made her feel beautiful or special, not even for a moment, and she wept for herself and for the lovely body she had lost. Mima, the girl noticed, just before her last match went out, was not whole. Her breasts were missing and most of her guts. The granddaughter remembered the strange mass of tissue on the porch. She shuddered and wept and waited for death. In the fading matchlight, the girl saw that her grandmother's heart glistened and pulsed atop the heap of womanly, satisfied flesh. The wolf had eaten Mima's heart last. He had left her tumors for the crows. The end. Thank you.
Oh, good evening. I'm Greta McDonough, and I think this is my 16th year at Hindman. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you tonight the creative nonfiction faculty member, Sonja Livingston. She's the author of 4 books, numerous articles and essays. But I first knew Sonja by way of her essay, 1,000 Mary Doyles. I found it late one night on the Brevity website, and I have since sat in coffee houses and pubs and my own living room with people around me and have sent them the links to this essay. Their phones ding, they open the link, and then everything grows quiet. If you are not familiar with this essay, 1,000 Mary Doyles, do not let your head hit the pillow tonight without having read it. See what 523 words can become in a skillful writer's hands. In her second book of essays, Queen of the Fall, she recounts an episode where she is discussing a memory with her sister. And of course, they remember it differently, and Sonja writes of memory, "Those are the facts, but not the truth, which does not speak the same language." Those are the facts, but not the truth, which does not even speak the same language. And I was struck by that, and I thought, isn't it there in that space between fact and truth where a writer's work really begins, no matter what the genre? Sonja's work is deep, but accessible, and then there is this other transcendent thing. But even so, she is our kind of people. She is kind and encouraging and generous, but she also creates playlists for road trips to match the landscape she'll travel through. 10,000 Maniacs, let's say, or I Love It, or maybe even Chanting Nuns if she finds herself busting through Missouri. I don't know why nuns. And with a close reading of her work, we begin to think that maybe she is some kind of genius homing pigeon, one who is trained to suss out all the best bakeries in every state, county, country, township, or parish she may find herself in. And then she writes the most lovingly crafted essays about all of the wonderful baked goods. So you see, she is one of us. I wonder what she would make of Yoder's. So please tonight welcome with me to Heinemann for her very first visit, Sonja Livingston.
Thank you, Greta. That's great. Thank you. I do know how to get baked goods. I don't know that thing you just talked about, but I'll figure it out. I think the best thing I've written in the past couple of years was an article called "The Donut as a Spiritual Experience." And I was thrilled when I found out that article won honorable mention for the Catholic Press Association or something. Like, I've won more literary awards, but that one thrilled me to no end. I do love writing about food. I think, like the landscape, it's really essential to who we are as people. I'm so honored to be with you tonight. I'm sorry that I'm a hovering head there instead of in that room with you, but just even via Zoom, the welcome and the friendliness and the wonderful voices that I've experienced so far already this week let me know that in person would be all the more. So it's been really wonderful. Thank you. Thank you to my workshop. It's funny that Greta mentioned that essay, 1,000 Mary Doyles. I don't think that I've read that in probably 5 years, but I plan to read it tonight, so you don't have to look it up. I'm going to read 4 very short essays, and 3 of them are new work. They're a project that I've been working on lately about ancestors. I think a lot of us write about ancestors, or maybe it happens when you get older. For me, it's definitely as I get older, I'm much more curious about those who came before me. But I think for maybe 25 years, I've been writing nonfiction, and what that means for me is like memoir, essays, donuts, whatever, just the real world. I interact with it and I write about it. And something happened, I think 6 or 7 years ago, where I suddenly realized that I didn't need to just stick to memory or research in my nonfiction. Those things are fine, and I love to read work that is based on memory or research. But what I realized, and it was this turning point for me, was that I could actually let myself imagine. And so I wrote a book of essays about women's lives, and they were women that I never knew. So I had to imagine. And this Mary Doyle essay comes from that time. So I'll read the Mary Doyle essay and then the three newer ones. And I'll just start by saying, so all of these are ancestors in some way. Mary Doyle is a woman that I discovered when I was doing research into my family tree. And, my family's a little unusual in that we have 5 fathers and 5 daughters. So there's all kinds of genetic material going around in our family, but none of us really knew our father's stories at all. So as we've gotten older, we've had DNA tests and we've done all kinds of research to figure out who are the people that we didn't know. And so what I'm reading tonight comes from that sort of search. Mary Doyle was a surprise because I knew my father was French Canadian. And so I was delighted to find this Irish woman in the French Canadian family tree. And I thought, oh, Mary Doyle, I know that she was born in 1876 in County Mayo and ended up in Albany, New York. I'll just look her up. That's going to be great. I imagined it already, how wonderful it would be to learn all about her. Well, what I discovered very quickly is that there were many, many women named Mary Doyle who left Ireland in the 19th century. There were many girls, many men, right? They lost half their population to death or emigration. So I decided after trying to find my Mary Doyle that maybe the specific Mary I was looking for wasn't the actual story. So this essay is called 1,000 Mary Doyles, and it's inspired by my trying to find that one Mary. There she is, Mary Doyle, and another right beside her, head turned for one last view of land before the Cork coastline slips out of sight. Dishwater strands pushed behind her ears, yellow curls pulled up under a hat, dark frizz flying in the wind. She is 17. She is 22. She is just yesterday turned 29. Look at her now, studying the sky in place of crying, trying to remember what everyone has said, begging Mary, the most holy mother of God, they might make it across the ocean alive. She leaves behind her favorite cow and the kitchen garden she's been fighting for years. She leaves behind her mother's grave, her sister's face, and Uncle Timo's way with the plow. She leaves behind the traveling priest, the Sunday masses, and the words to every song she knows, the pretty laments and the keening, and Mr. Byrne with the tin whistle, and here it comes now, her father's hand, swollen and cracked as it is, the way he held it to her father's hand, soft as old cloth against her cheek. She leaves behind the big house on the hill and the broken buggy leaning against Coughlin's cottage. Will it, oh will it, ever get fixed? And the marsh violet, and the burnet rose, and the blackthorn too sometimes. The patchwork of fields, and the baby Lizzie with her dark eyes and funny ways. What will the little one be like as she grows? And the Abbey, of course. What times they had there, the slick moss and cold stone, and her best friend Bertie, who swears upon her life she will write. But both girls know how these things go. A few long letters at first, the distance between them widening as the world settles into the spaces made by those who leave, until words are folded less often into envelopes. Because if there's one thing everyone knows, when someone leaves Ballyhownis, sure enough, she's gone for good. Mary Doyle, come from Moycullen, from Westmeath, from Usher's Quay, come from Poolnamuk, Wisalia, and Tourmakeedy, from Kilmena, Collooney, and Cahermacrea, from Portlaoise, Mount Shannon, and Roscommon, from Dunamore, Dunlahair, and Drogheda. That one there with the reddish hair, the tall one with the overproud back, the one gone flat against the rail, trying her best to hide the sight of a broken shoe under her trunk, fan of fingers placed on her brow. That one, and that one, then again that one too. Sailed in 1851, sailed in 1847, left from Queenstown in 1869. See her now, stepping from the gangway, swaying a bit as her feet reach solid land. That's her there, scanning all out, but we can at least see her. Every girl bound for Boston, New York, and the upper St. Lawrence. We can't call out, but we can look for a moment in her direction to see what might be found in her face. for she belongs to all of us, says our girl, Mary Doyle. So the next three pieces are also just very brief essays that that are based on ancestors, and depending on who they are, the ancestry is a little more murky. This one is called Magdalene, and she's somebody who I guess isn't a direct ancestor. She more feels like an ancestor. She was born in the later Ice Age in Southwest France. And so she was born in an area where a lot of my ancestors came from, the French side who came up into Canada. And so I'll go ahead and read this one. It's in 3 parts, Magdalene. In the age of the reindeer, in the place where horses are carved, her body is set into the ground. Hands under head curled onto one side, she holds her position until 1911, when a worker strikes the limestone with a pickaxe, shattering her skull. Dead 13,000 years, and still a woman's body is subject to the fits of man. They piece her together, a puzzle of cheekbone, mandible, and teeth. The blades of her pelvis are shallow and wide, women's bones open to what comes. Magdalenian girl, they call her at first. Magdalenian woman and Cop Blanc lady when they realize she's grown. Also in the rock shelter, tools fashioned of antler, a frieze rubbed with red ochre over most of the back wall, carvings of bison and reindeer, the hooves and horns of animals we can no longer make out, a team of horses that look as if they're flying through the face of the rock. 2. After purchasing her body in 1926 in New York, Henry Field packs Magdalene into his suitcase and whisks her to Chicago on a westbound train. Late afternoon light fills the silver hull. Tens of thousands flock to see her when she's displayed. A fine specimen, the most complete Paleolithic skeleton we Americans have ever seen. She's still there, 1 floor up from the food court, past the sea mammal diorama, in the Hall of Ancient Wonders, next to the display of cave art and hair combs made of bone. Magdalene's been stowed at the Field Museum so long, we've come to think of it as her home. But what is 1 century compared to 100? Even as they crack apart her casings and stare into her open mouth, Magdalene is dreaming of blue foxes and Arctic hares. She's replaying the chisel of needle and following of herds. She's off scraping hides, bearing children, and packing up when the hard winds come. She's dreaming of the cache of berries she found last summer, and a dozen red horses flying over her head. 3. Scientists have made a plaster cast of her bones and returned a replica to her nest at Cop Blanc. There's now a 3D model of her skull. You can print a copy and hold it in your hand. A forensic artist has reconstructed her face, coiled her dark hair to a crown of beads, making her look like a French movie star. I suppose we're all trying to make something of Magdalene. I am making her into my greatest grandmother. I'm making her into an ivory bowl that holds the day the snow melts in the Vizier Valley and she knows it's time to go. I'm staining her fingers with ochre, watching her put the finishing touches on the last of the horses before she leaves behind the enormity of the frieze. I'm making her into the moment she steps out from under the limestone overhang, the exact second she follows the stone path bordered with wildflowers and takes in the vast expanse of all that has not yet been parsed, studied, or named. This next ancestor is, well, she doesn't have a name. I gave her the name. In fact, the essay, which maybe looks on the page like a poem, but the piece of writing, I'll call it, because I'm not sure what it is exactly, is called Easter because I've given her that name. And so the piece is about why I've given her that name. She, like I think a lot of families have this story, maybe your family has it too, and maybe it's true, but we were always told that we had a Mohawk relative on my mother's side. In fact, my grandmother, who liked to drink whiskey and get riled up, used to say, I'm going up to the St. Regis Reservation and demanding our land, you know? Thank goodness that never happened. This large white drunk woman never went up to the reservation to demand her land, and that's a good thing because when we did those DNA tests, we discovered that none of us had Native American. We didn't have blood at all, except my youngest sister, who actually, that's a whole separate category. But we did have little smidgens of sub-Saharan African blood. And so the research that I've done has led me to discover, I think I'm pretty certain that this relative, this great-great-great-great-grandmother who was supposedly Native American was in fact an enslaved woman in New York State, in Orange County, New York. Okay, so this is her. She was born about 1750 in Orange County, and her name is Easter. And why Easter? Because the man who bought you was born in the hull of a ship. Because his skin is so white, the blue comes through. Because he swears to God, he can still hear the moan of boat and rocking of the sea. Because his Ulster voice is 2 parts gravel, 1 part honey, 1 part salt. Because he mixes up words like love and possession and rocks your body like waves. Because history does not record your name. Because I'll never know how you feel when the sound of his boots lands at your door. Because a blue wave is still a wave. Because no one can say whether the man born between 2 worlds buys you a cabin with a proper bed in the place near Wallkill where the freed men and women live. Because they call that place the honey pot for the sweetness of the water there. Because your stomach has begun to swell. Because a drop is an ocean in 1773. Because grandmother of my grandmother's ever unfolding green branch, your son will grow tall and handsome and pass. Because his daughter will make her home at Ticonderoga, call herself a Mohawk, and birth 21 children near that crumbling fort. Because 21 is more than the number of men in a squad, squads in a platoon, and colonies in New England. Because the 11th of her babies is a boy called Charles Thorne. Because his body is a basket woven with strands of your DNA. Because he carries you to Julian, who carries you to Sylvia, who carries you to Anna Mae, who drinks so hard she almost loses you, but survives long enough to carry you to my mother, Louise, who carries you my way. Because there you are on the 7th chromosome, a speck of crimson breaking up the blue. Because of the movement of water and the hard, clean wash of this old world. Because emotions of your life are written in disappearing ink. Because of overgrown lilacs scenting the air along Lake Champlain. Because when I face south from Ticonderoga, I feel at home. Because it's spring when I think of you. Because you are not lost. Because you rise even after all these years. And then the last one actually is a German. I discovered a German great-great. There are just all kinds of people represented. You know, I hope that you're doing some family research too, because I found like a Mayflower, not a Mayflower madam, but a woman actually from the Mayflower. I found an accused witch. I found some, a French-Canadian woman who is a murderer. Like there's all kinds of stories. Most of the stories though are pretty much about really poor people who had no choice, and so they had to move from one land to the next, and so that's most of what I'm writing about. But every once in a while, I'll get somebody different. And so this Margaret Liebfried is a surprise. She's a German great grandmother, and I'm going to try to put the photo of her that I have up in the camera, and I don't know how it's going to work. So maybe you can see her a little. Did you see her? Put a thumbs up if you saw her. Okay. Yes. She's basically a big German lady with a secretive smile, I think. So anyway, that's what I see. So she was born in 1880 in Germany and died in Albany, New York in 1964. So really an interesting era. So here I go. The blue eyes, they come through. The thick neck and the straight chins. The great expansive bosom. I know the burden of such fullness and the pleasures too. Before I found you, I'd look at my mother's flat chest and wonder where I came from. I love you for the smile most of all. The ends of your mouth turned down out of shyness or habit, but still the smile arrives. The photograph must be from the 1920s, but with the Victorian collar and solemn Frau dress, you could have stepped out of a previous century. It's not difficult to imagine you with a wooden spoon in your hand, but only for the beating of eggs, Oma, for it's clear you lived in the kitchen and did not often refuse a helping of bread. If you were here, you'd throw an apron over that fusty dress and teach me to make Bienenstich, bee-sting cake. You'd explain while kneading the dough and how warm the kitchen would be as you start to sing in German. And I'd half listen while begging dollops of custard and popping honeyed almonds into my mouth. Oh, Maggie, my Apfelstrudel, my Lebkuchen, my Pfeffernuss, gone before I was born, and still you sweeten the air. Buried at Our Lady of the Angels Cemetery, surrounded by those you gossiped with after Mass back when Albany still had a German church. What was it like to be German in America during the wars, or to be German in America anytime at all? Those I ask say you don't want to know, but I do want to know. I locate your husband's draft card, track down your name on census records, city directories, and the New York State Death Index. And just when I think that's all, I find you again, this time on a passenger manifest, Scandinavian Airlines Flight 1668, New York to Germany, November 8, 1951, back when flying was new. You checked only one bag. Your husband had died 20 years before. Alone at 70, who fetched you from the airport at Hamburg? Did you grab hold of cousins, shake your head at times passing, weep at the sight of bombed buildings and the view of Stolzenfels Castle perched there on the Rhine? And before you landed, what was it like up in those clouds? Tell me, great-great-grandmother, what do you see from on high? Thank you.
All right, thank you all so much. We will do our quick little drawing this evening. Jordan comes forward. He's coming. He is coming. This evening we're giving away a copy of Back to the Lot from Georgella Line, and another copy of Even As We Breathe. So pull those out. We'll draw one for Back to the Lot. Georgella's. A little piece of paper. And height. So we will find Anne. Congratulations. I'm sorry. We're giving away 3. We're also giving away a copy of Fuckface. My bad. Yes, 3. I'm sorry. We'll give 3 away now. My bad. I'm sorry. No, it was not an afterthought. Where's my 3rd? I didn't say it. Linda McAuliffe. We will congratulate her. And then for a copy of one of the readings this evening, I try not to say it as many times because I don't know who's listening to me, and then they'll just make me have some sweet dear ladies. Lisa McCormick, right? Well, this will be the easiest one we find a home for. Thank you all so much, and we are adjourned. We'll see you all in the morning.